This is a very important message for you today. Do not ignore it. Pay attention to this message. Believe it or not, silence is never empty. When someone you once spoke to every day suddenly disappears, when messages stop coming, when their name no longer lights up your screen, you begin to wonder. Did I matter at all? Was it just a phase? Did they ever care the way I did? But the truth is, when someone doesn't call or message you for a long time, it doesn't always mean they've forgotten you. Sometimes it means they remember you too much. So much that it hurts. So much that they don't know how to face the memory of what you were together without falling apart. Silence becomes the only way they know how to cope. Not with you, but with themselves. Some people vanish not because they no longer feel, but because they feel too deeply. And sometimes their distance is not a wall, it's a wound. You may think their silence is rejection, but what if it's regret? What if every time they scroll through their phone, your name burns like a soft ache in the back of their mind? What if they type messages and delete them before pressing send, not because they don't want to speak to you, but because they don't know what words would be enough to bridge the silence they created? People disappear for reasons that go beyond logic. Fear. Shame. Timing. Confusion. They pull away because your presence reminds them of a version of themselves they're not ready to return to. But here's the most beautiful truth. If someone's silence makes you feel something, it means you still care. It means your heart hasn't closed. And that's not weakness, that's strength. You didn't choose silence. You chose love. You chose patience. You chose to wait with grace, not because you're stuck, but because you're honest. And honesty is rare. In a world full of ghosts and half-hearted connections, your willingness to stay soft while they stay silent is divine. Don't let their absence make you question your worth. Don't let their delay define your dignity. Their silence speaks about them. But your stillness? That speaks of your soul. Because sometimes, when someone doesn't reach out, it doesn't mean they've stopped caring. It means they're scared of what caring might look like now. It means they're lost. It means they're learning that love cannot live in pride. And you, still here, still feeling, still remembering, you are the reminder they cannot silence no matter how far they run. The bond between souls isn't always seen in phone calls or long chats. Sometimes it's seen in the quiet ache, in the unfinished sentence, in the space between what was and what might still be. So breathe. If they haven't called, it's okay. It doesn't erase the moments you shared. It doesn't change what was real. And maybe, just maybe, they're waiting too, waiting for the courage, the timing, the light to return. And until then, let your heart stay soft. Let it stay open. Let it know this, the silence isn't your fault, and your love was never wasted. Believe it or not, silence is not the absence of feeling. It is often the place where the loudest emotions hide. When someone doesn't call you for weeks, when your message stays unread, when you wait for hours hoping for even a single "hi," it doesn't always mean they've stopped caring. Sometimes, it means they care too much, and that love has become heavy in their chest. People often avoid the ones they feel most deeply connected to, not because those people bring them pain, but because they stir up truth. Your presence reminds them of a version of themselves they are still healing. Your name reminds them of warmth they no longer feel worthy of. So instead of leaning in, they pull away. Not out of anger, but out of confusion. You sit and wonder if they've moved on. You scroll through old messages, reread memories that once felt so alive, and ask yourself, did I imagine it all? But no, you didn't. What you shared was real. The silence now doesn't erase the moments that made your heart feel full. Their distance doesn't rewrite the way they used to smile when your name appeared on their screen. The bond you had wasn't broken, it just went quiet. And sometimes, that quiet isn't rejection. It's retreat. It's the soul taking a deep breath because it doesn't know how to speak what it feels anymore. You have to understand, love doesn't always look like constant messages and calls. Love sometimes looks like a person watching your story from afar, praying you're okay, missing you silently but too afraid to say so. Not because you don't matter, but because you matter too much. And when something matters that deeply, people often believe they'll ruin it if they speak. So they wait. But the wait becomes a wall. And the wall becomes silence. And the silence becomes a misunderstanding. But underneath all of it, there is still an emotion that hasn't died, it has only hidden itself behind time. So don't let their silence make you hate your tenderness. Don't let their absence make you believe your presence was too much. Sometimes people leave not because you were too much, but because you were more than they thought they deserved. You were light, and they were still walking through their shadow. And when shadow meets light, it either heals, or it runs. If they ran, it wasn't your fault. And if they stayed quiet, it wasn't because you weren't enough, it was because they weren't ready. One day, maybe they'll explain. Maybe they won't. But either way, don't close your heart to connection just because someone else didn't know how to hold it. You loved right. You stayed present. You remembered. And that kind of love is never wasted. Even if it was received in silence, it was felt. And deep down, they know it, believe it or not, time doesn't always change how people feel, it only reveals what they were never brave enough to say. When someone you once shared your laughter with stops calling, when the hours stretch into days. Then weeks, and your name isn't spoken aloud anymore, the mind begins to create painful stories. Maybe they don't miss me. Maybe they forgot. Maybe I meant nothing. But pause. Breathe. And look deeper. Because sometimes, their silence is not a statement of absence, it's a cry for help that they don't know how to voice. When someone disappears from your world, it doesn't always mean you were unloved. It might mean they didn't know how to be loved in the way you gave. So many people walk through life carrying unresolved emotions. They don't ignore you because you weren't important. They go quiet because their heart is tired, confused, or ashamed. Maybe they thought they weren't enough for you. Maybe your kindness made them feel exposed. Maybe their love was real, but they were not ready for something that required truth. So instead of showing up, they shut down. And silence becomes their safety. But deep within that silence, there are moments, small sacred moments. When they think of you and wonder if you've moved on. Wonder if they ruined it. Wonder if you'd still smile if their name appeared on your phone today. You see, people don't always leave because they don't care. They leave because the weight of what they feel is heavier than what they know how to handle. They're not messaging you because they're afraid of what they'll say. Not because there's nothing to say, but because the right words never come when the heart is still healing. It's not that they've stopped checking your name, or stopped remembering the sound of your voice, or stopped rereading old chats. They just don't know if they deserve a reply from you now. And until they heal that within themselves, you won't hear from them. But you who stayed soft, you are proof that silence cannot erase meaning. You are proof that love does not need constant words to be felt deeply. You are the reminder that real connection doesn't vanish just because distance appeared. And even if you never receive the message you longed for, know this: you were felt. The love you gave echoed through someone's life far longer than the last time you heard from them. The silence didn't mean you were erased. It meant you stayed, in their thoughts, in their healing, in the place they didn't know how to reopen. So don't let the silence harden you. Don't let it teach you to close off. You didn't lose anything by loving truly. You didn't waste your time by staying kind. You planted a seed of warmth in someone's life that might bloom quietly, long after you've stopped waiting. And even if they never say it, believe it or not, you were never forgotten. Believe it or not, when someone goes quiet for a long time, it doesn't always mean you were easy to walk away from, it could mean you were impossible to forget. Sometimes, it's not that they didn't want to speak to you, it's that every word they wanted to say felt too small for what they truly felt. They didn't stop talking because they stopped feeling, they stopped because their emotions had no roadmap. Your presence in their life wasn't a chapter, it was a mirror. And mirrors are hard to face when you're still trying to fix the reflection. So they backed away. They didn't know how to hold something so gentle without breaking it. And instead of showing their confusion, they showed their distance. There are people walking through life carrying the weight of unsent messages and unread goodbyes. They hold on to old laughter in the quietest hours of the night, wondering how something so real could feel so far away now. They see your name in songs, in places, in time. And every time they want to reach out, something inside them whispers, "What if it's too late?" They fear your silence more than they ever feared their own. So they say nothing. But silence doesn't mean you disappeared from their life. It means you took up space in their heart that no one else has ever been able to replace. You, reading this, need to know, your kindness didn't go unnoticed. Your presence wasn't invisible. What you gave didn't evaporate, it echoed. It still does. In places you cannot see. In moments you may never hear about. But you were felt. Even now, even if they haven't said a word, you are a memory that moves them in ways they're not ready to face. You were real. You were light. You were the kind of peace they didn't know how to hold. And that's not your failure. That's your power. So don't carry their silence like it's a reflection of your worth. Don't punish your heart just because someone else didn't know how to honor it. Your love was not too much. It was exactly enough. And if they never find the words to tell you, they still feel it. in their quiet, in their guilt, in the space where your absence lives like a song they can't forget. Believe it or not, some people never stop caring. They just never learn how to say it in time. And maybe they'll come back. Maybe they won't. But you? You keep growing. You keep loving. You keep staying open to the kind of love that doesn't get quiet when things get real. Because you are not waiting, you are becoming. And one day, whether it's from their voice or someone new who sees your soul fully, you will be reminded that your love never disappeared into silence. It was simply waiting for someone brave enough to speak it back to you. Believe it or not, when someone disappears from your life without a warning, without a proper goodbye, without even a short message to say why, they're not always walking away from you, they might be running away from themselves. From the feelings they couldn't process. From the connection they didn't expect. From the reality that your love was too honest in a world that taught them to keep emotions guarded and words half-spoken. There are people who miss you deeply and still stay silent, not because they don't care, but because they care in ways that make them feel powerless. They scroll past your photos with a tight chest, write messages they never send, whisper your name into their pillow in the middle of the night, not knowing how to fix what they broke with their absence. Their silence doesn't mean they don't feel. It means they feel everything, and they don't know how to hold it without falling apart. You see, love doesn't always vanish with time. Sometimes it hides behind fear, behind guilt, behind ego. Behind the belief that they've lost their right to speak to you again. They remember how you looked at them when they spoke their truth. They remember how you stayed when you had every reason to leave. And it haunts them. Not because you did something wrong, but because they did. And your patience, your loyalty, your softness, it became a mirror. A reflection of the person they wanted to be, but weren't ready to become. So they pulled away. Not because you pushed, but because the truth you carried made it hard for them to lie to themselves any longer. And now you're here. Still remembering. Still wondering. Still feeling the echo of a voice that once felt like home. And you ask yourself if it meant anything. If the silence means it was all one-sided. But beloved, silence is not emptiness. Silence is a story that hasn't been told yet. And the truth is, they think of you. More often than they let on. They wonder if you still care. They wonder if you've forgotten them. They wonder if, someday, they'll have the courage to show up again, not as someone who ran, but as someone who grew. You're not waiting. You're healing. There's a difference. Waiting keeps you stuck. Healing sets you free. And what you're doing now, reading this, letting your heart break open with soft truth, it's healing. It's letting go of the need for closure. It's accepting that not every story ends with clarity, but some stories leave behind truth. And the truth is, you loved. You gave. You showed up. And nothing about that was weak. In fact, it was divine. Because love that remains soft in the face of silence is not ordinary, it's sacred, so hold your head high. Not because they left, but because you stayed kind. You stayed real. You stayed present, even when it hurt. And maybe they'll return one day, with new words and a softer heart. Or maybe they won't. But either way, you will not be empty. Because your love was never a waste, it was a seed. And seeds don't disappear. They bloom in time. Sometimes in others. Sometimes in you. Believe it or not, when someone stops calling or messaging you, it doesn't always mean they've erased you from their world. It might mean they've buried you inside their soul where they visit quietly but never speak aloud. Some people don't lose feelings. They lose the courage to carry them. And when emotions grow too big to hold, silence becomes their shelter. You've probably asked yourself 100 times, why did they stop talking? How can someone go from sharing everything to sharing nothing at all? But the answer lives beneath the words that were never said. The truth is, when people go silent, it's not because they don't remember you, it's because they remember you too much, and remembering hurts more than forgetting ever could. You are the memory they try to ignore when their chest tightens out of nowhere. You are the voice in the back of their mind when they sit in quiet rooms and wish they had handled things differently. They may not reach out, but that doesn't mean they've let go. Their silence is not closure, it's delay. They keep you tucked beneath their routines, in the spaces between music and nightfall, in the pauses between laughter and loneliness. And when someone else says your name, they flinch. Not because it's foreign, but because it's familiar in a way they never truly healed from. They don't talk about you, but they think of you. And that, sometimes, is more powerful than words. The hardest part? You might never hear this from them. You might never receive the apology, the message, the explanation you deserved. And yet, that doesn't mean your presence faded. Some people never find the courage to return to the people they love most, not because the love wasn't real, but because guilt built a wall too high for them to climb. You're not forgotten. You're frozen in time inside someone's soul, wrapped in memory, suspended in a silence they don't know how to break. But your heart? It continues to move. And that's what matters. You are not trapped in their story, you are evolving in your own. It's not your job to wait. It's not your role to wonder. You did your part. You showed up. You loved with your whole heart. And you stayed soft in a world that taught you to grow cold. That kind of love is not weakness. That kind of love is rare. And even if they don't tell you, they know it. They feel it. They carry it like a gentle ache in the places where your kindness once lived. And maybe one day they'll understand what they walked away from. Maybe they already do. But either way, the truth stands strong, you were real, you were light, and you were love. So breathe. Let your healing continue. Let your heart rest from all the questioning. Because love, the kind you gave, never disappears. It transforms. It blesses. It leaves fingerprints on souls that silence can't erase. You don't need to go back to be remembered. You don't need to hear from them to be validated. You are already held in a space no silence can reach. And that space, dear one, is sacred. Believe it or not, when someone stops reaching out, it's not always the end, it's often the beginning of a silence they don't know how to escape. There are moments they hold their phone, open your name, stare at the screen, and close it again because they don't trust themselves to speak without shaking. You were never just another person to them. You were a moment in time that shifted their heart, a place they felt seen in a world that often left them feeling invisible. But when someone doesn't know how to return to that softness without confronting their own brokenness, they choose silence. Not because it's easy, but because facing you means facing everything they buried inside themselves when they let you go. They didn't stop messaging you because they stopped caring. They stopped because they didn't know how to continue being who you needed them to be. And instead of confessing their confusion, they let you wonder in the dark. They let the distance grow. They let time speak on their behalf, even when their heart screamed for reconciliation. And the truth they will probably never say out loud is this: they miss you every single day. But in the silence, missing you quietly feels safer than loving you openly. So they do what broken people often do, they love in silence and pretend they've moved on. But you've been strong in ways they'll never fully understand. You didn't reach out of desperation, you held your peace with dignity. You didn't chase closure, you became it. And while they wrestle with regrets in hidden corners of their mind, you've grown. You've softened. You've become deeper. Wiser. You've carried a love they couldn't return without turning it into pain, and you still chose to love anyway. That kind of strength doesn't scream, it stays. That kind of heart doesn't beg, it breathes. And even though they haven't called, haven't messaged, haven't explained, you've learned to live with the ache and not let it steal your light. They will think of you during the quietest hours. When the world goes still and their heart begins to speak again. When they see something that reminds them of your laughter. When someone asks, what happened to her, and they don't know how to answer. Because what happened wasn't your fault. It was theirs. Their silence was never proof that you didn't matter. It was proof that you mattered too much. Enough to scare them. Enough to shake something loose in them they weren't ready to deal with. And instead of stepping forward, they stepped away. But don't let that silence define you. Don't let it sink into your spirit like a verdict. You are not the one who vanished. You are not the one who left things undone. You are the one who stayed real. Who felt it all. Who loved with honesty and walked away with grace. You are the story they tell themselves when they say, if I could go back, would do it differently. And whether they do or not, your heart will remain whole. Because silence never breaks those who already learned how to rise without being called. Believe it or not, when someone goes silent for a long time, it doesn't always mean they're finished. With you. It often means they've never figured out how to begin again. Their silence is not always coldness, it's sometimes chaos. An inner war between what they feel and what they fear. Because some people loved you deeper than they ever admitted, but the weight of that love made them feel unworthy. So instead of drawing closer, they stepped back. Not because they didn't want to be held by your honesty, but because they didn't know how to stay without being exposed. And so, they stayed away, not to forget you, but to protect themselves from facing what they couldn't fix. They don't call because hearing your voice would remind them of everything they've lost. They don't message because typing, "I miss you," feels too small for the avalanche of emotion they buried. And while you've been wondering what you did wrong, they've been drowning in the question of how something so right slipped through their fingers. But pride is louder than vulnerability. Guilt is stronger than words. So they sit in silence, hoping time will speak where their courage failed. And you, unknowingly, become the soft ache in their chest every time someone asks, "Why did you let them go?" You were never invisible to them. In fact, you were the one presence they couldn't escape. Your memory lingers in the way they speak more gently now. In the way they flinch when someone mentions your name. In the quiet sigh they let out when they hear a song you once shared. And though you may never hear it directly from them, they miss you. They miss your laughter, your warmth, your honesty, your rare ability to hold space for their chaos. But they also know they can't show up empty-handed. They can't return unless they've changed. And so, they delay. They wait. They hope. Even if they're silent, they're still listening, for a sign, for forgiveness, for a way back they're too afraid to ask for. But your life has moved forward. Your heart has learned to hold pain without becoming bitter. You've found light again without needing someone else to switch it on. And that doesn't mean you stopped caring, it means you stopped chasing what refuses to come with clarity. It means you loved enough to let go. It means you grew into a version of yourself that doesn't shrink in someone's silence anymore. You became your own peace. And maybe, just maybe, that was the lesson all along, not to wait for someone else to fill the space, but to become. The one who finally sees your worth was never dependent on their words. Still, if they ever reach for you, it won't be because they randomly remembered. It will be because they never truly forgot. And whether or not they return, you will know this: you mattered. You were real. You were unforgettable. And their silence was never a reflection of your absence, it was a reaction to your impact. You didn't need closure to heal. You needed truth. And the truth is this: you were never hard to love. They were just not ready to receive a love that required them to rise. So let your heart breathe. Let it unclench from the ache. Let it rest in the knowing that love doesn't end in silence, it simply changes form. And your love? It was a river. It ran deep, and it ran pure. And whether or not they ever return to sit beside its banks, it will continue flowing with grace, dignity, and depth. Because real love, even when unanswered, leaves behind something eternal: truth. If you trust in divine timing, type Amen. Type 111, 555, or 000 if you feel the presence of angels around you.